This is the Minted Podcast, a show for small business owners running a business and a life at the same time. If you're at the point where you are done winging it, but outsourcing or hiring still feels a step away, this show is for you. Hi, I'm Lisa Morey, the founder of Mint Agency, and today we're answering this question: how do I achieve a better work-life balance as a mother in business? And to help us to do that, I'm speaking with Dr Sonia McMullen, the founder of Strive Rehab. All right, let's get minted. Welcome, Sonia. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, for anyone who doesn't know Strive Rehab, how about we get started with how your business all came about?
So I'm a physiotherapist, and I believe it'll be 18 years as a physio this March, if you can tell I'm American, and moved to Australia about 14 years ago now, I think. And so I'd worked as a physio in Chicago, Illinois, and that was in a hospital. And then when I moved to Australia, I worked in the hospital system as well. When I had my kids, I found I wanted more flexible working hours, which was a bit tricky, and decided at that point in my life as well that I wanted sort of autonomy over how I was working. So I started considering going out on my own, which I had no idea what it was going to look like. At the same time, I'd done Pilates for years and found that it really helped my body with a lot of things that I was going through personally, and wanted to combine Pilates with physio. And so I did my Pilates teacher training, which I believe I finished in 2022. So I did that sort of through the COVID pandemic with little babies and trying to go back to work. It was a very busy time, but came out with my teacher training and started Strive Rehab, which is essentially a physio and Pilates rehab practice. I see a variety of clientele. I see musculoskeletal, so people with pain and things like that, needing strengthening. But I also have a background in neurological and amputee prosthetic training. And I also have vestibular training, so I see dizzy clients as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a wide range of services.
It is a wide range. So in the regional areas, so we being in Wagga, in New South Wales, we're considered regional, and in terms of not city-based. Often in cities, you can really specialize. You see the sort of same clientele over and over and over again. But in regional areas, in the physio world, we call them rural generalists. And so I've become, since living in Wagga, a generalist. And I actually love it because it actually makes me work harder, sort of mentally kind of thinking about the whole body, not just in one area and doing just the one area over and over again. So as a generalist in the last sort of decade, I've actually gotten quite good at a variety of things, and it also makes it a lot more fun because I'm someone who needs novelty in my work. And in the last probably 5 to 6 years, I've really focused in a lot on women's health, and particularly in helping women regain strength after surgeries, after babies. That's something that I'm really passionate about now, partly because I've done it for my own sake as well, my own wellness.
And how have you found the business side of things? Like, obviously, if you were working in, did you say government sector beforehand?
So I was in government sector, hospital. Yeah.
And so had you been in a small business practice before?
When I first moved to Wagga, I had supervision for my registration while I was getting my registration. And so I started in a sports practice, and I had a great experience there with lots of support and learned a lot, absolutely learned a lot, because I came from the hospital system in America into an Australian private practice, sports-centered practice. So it was a big change for me. I learned a lot. And I think that actually really helped me when I started thinking about going out on my own, because had I not had that experience, I would have only been a hospital physio and in a government system. And so I sort of understood a little bit more about what it's like to run a business and what it's like to kind of have to move at a quick pace, because when you're in private practice, you do need to work probably at maybe a bit more of an intensity, if that makes sense.
Yes. So what did you find different about going from working as an employee to a business owner?
It's interesting because what I've sort of seen now in hindsight is a lot of people in the private practice sector talk about how in your graduate degree or your university degree for physio, how come there's not more information about how to run a business? Because most physios are trained to be a physio, but so many physios end up opening their own practices. So a large contingent, I don't know what the percentages are, but a large contingent definitely own their own practices and have to learn things like accounting and have to upskill in areas like marketing and all those areas. And for the first 6 months of my practice, I'm coming up to 5 years in April, It's gone in a blink.
In a good way, of course.
Yes, yeah. But I'll never forget, actually, I was about 6 months in and I was absolutely drowning in all of the marketing, the accounting, all the things that I very quickly discovered I'm not good at. And I went to the post office and I saw your pamphlet that said, do you need help in your small business? And I was like, yes. And it had all the things listed on there. I was so grateful that you had like the bullet points on your little pamphlet because you were like accounting and all I found really tricky.
I knew you were going to the post office that day.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so
I remember
planted.
thinking, I remember going home and discussing it with my husband and sort of being like, should I do this now? Is it too early in my business? And if anything, I'd wish I'd done it earlier, because immediately discovering how fast someone else can do the marketing and someone else can do the accounting, because it was such a time, almost like a time waster when I was trying to teach myself how to do it. And had I maybe outsourced that sooner, I would have opened up a lot more time to focus back on the clinical side of things, which is what I'm interested in and what I'm passionate about.
Very grateful you got that flyer too.
Yep, I haven't let you go. I haven't let you go. I won't let you go. Yep.
Yeah, it's good that you're not too proud to say, you know what, like I love the clinical stuff and the hands-on stuff. Why not just let someone else do the admin that may be boring to some people, or the bookkeeping or the marketing? Like, why not someone do it that loves it, can do it quicker, and you don't have to, recreate the wheel.
And I think that going back to the idea of that this stage of life, you're so time poor with I want to be a mum first and a business owner and a physio second. And with the amount of time that you have free to do these things, I just sort of realized it was going to be so worth the handover, and like pride doesn't even come into it. I just know that I'm not good at it. And I had to learn that probably. So that's something that's important to keep in mind is give it a try first. And then, if it's not working, definitely ask for help. And I think in this stage of life, in my late 40s now, and pride was like a long time ago. Now it's like I'm much more clear about what I'm good at. I've done a lot of work on trying to get in tune with knowing myself. I've worked hard on making sure I have time to exercise. I make sure that I try and fit in some sort of mindfulness, whether it's a 2-minute meditation or something like that. Because I think if you're not in tune with yourself, you're not going to really know what you're good at. I think you're too scrambled and you're too busy. And so I've worked really hard on trying to slow down enough to know myself well enough to recognize what's working and what's not working, and being very honest with myself about what's not working. Who can I ask for help is probably been my first question now. And that happened even just this week. I have a complex client who is within the NDIS and has had a plan come through that isn't suitable for them. And immediately I looked at it and I felt overwhelmed. It's my job to be asking the NDIS for a better suited plan. I still wish that I get there quicker, because I spent probably 2 days thinking about it and considering it and waking up at 3 a.m. and thinking about it.
Oh.
And then probably on the third day I thought, I could ask for help. I rang someone who's a colleague and also a sort of mentor in that space, because they've got more experience, just a broader experience, more specific, I think, with this client's needs, and had a discussion, had a really good phone chat, and felt much more clear afterward. And that sense of sometimes when you are a solo practitioner, you do feel this heavy weight on your shoulders to figure it all out yourself, because you have to in some situations. But I think as a solo practitioner, you sort of have to remember that there is this big mentorship circle and colleague circle if you remember to ask and you remember to reach out. And I think that's one of the harder lessons, I think, when you do work for yourself, because you don't have someone sitting next to you that you can be like, oh, what about this? So you sort of have to be more intentional. You have to make the effort to pick up the phone, which feels awkward and uncomfortable, and to be that vulnerability, I guess, of asking, I'm stuck on this, can you help me? And every single time that person's glad to help, because they feel a sense of pride, I think, in being asked and being able to offer help. And so I think that's probably a big lesson for me that I'm trying to remember, is that ask for help sooner.
And such a valid point, because whether you're a practitioner or just generally in small business, we definitely find small business owners almost are embarrassed sometimes to come to us. And I totally get it. Like, I understand, like, you're letting go of your baby. And from the outside, everyone thinks that a business owner has their shit together.
Oh, God, no. Yeah, I definitely
don't.
Yeah, that definitely rings true because I remember in the early days of, I think it was there were two aspects of it. One was a sense of embarrassment that I felt so overwhelmed and I felt so scattered because I was 6 months deep into trying to do it myself. And it was a hot mess in terms of like the back end stuff, you know, the invoicing and accounting and any kind of marketing. You hadn't even entered the picture yet. I was just in like keeping my head above water. So there was definitely a sense of that embarrassment. And I remember probably for the first year kind of feeling like, a little bit embarrassed of sort of handing over your mess. It's a similar feeling I remember very clearly of having people drop in when I had little babies in the house as a mom.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, this is embarrassing, but oh well, here we are.
Yeah, totally relate to that. Even now, they're not babies.
Yeah, that discomfort and that vulnerability of showing your private space to someone when it isn't a perfect little world. And then I think the second aspect of me that was really, really difficult in the beginning was just having no idea where to start. Like when I did hand over the mess, I remember apologizing a lot. Like, I don't know even how to guide you. And that was the best thing I think of getting your help was that, you know, you had that very professional, like, we'll start somewhere, you know, just the applying that to parenting where, you know, one of your kids is struggling with something.
Yes.
And it's your job as the parent to say, okay, we've got to start with one thing. Let's start with one thing and then take the next thing. I think as those lessons as a business owner do apply actually to motherhood a lot.
Yes.
You know, where you do feel overwhelmed often, almost daily.
Yes.
Probably. I'm sure maybe there's mums out there that don't, but I don't know them. But just that simple tool of ask for help, you know, ask for help early, tackle one thing and, you know, if there's 10 surfaces that need cleaning, clean one and see how you feel. You know,
just start somewhere.
Yeah, start somewhere.
And that's the biggest thing, isn't it? Because we all get so overwhelmed that you become your own worst enemy because you're procrastinating.
Yes, yeah.
You're just putting your head in the sand. You're like, this is all getting too hard. And it just gets worse. Yeah. So it's just like making that next step. And so many people go through that in business, whether it's when you start out, when you go through your first growth period. Yeah. Has there been any significant stages through your business where you've went, this is not worth it?
I ask myself very often. I've tried to figure out if there's a pattern to that, and I can't quite figure out what the pattern is yet. I think I'm always looking for patterns, so it's sort of like so I can fix the problem. Yeah. But absolutely. And it probably feels as frequent as at least once a quarter. I'll probably think, is this worth it?
Yeah, wow.
Am I doing what I set out to do? And I try to remind myself that the whole reason I went out was so that I had the autonomy to rule out my schedule for athletics carnival or to not have to ask for time off. And for me, it was that I have a lot of discomfort in asking for things. So like asking for time off for something that's important to me. The second thing that's really, really difficult for me is letting people down. And I found in my previous role that it was that I had to go through IVF for all three of our kids, actually. And so there was kind of like a full decade of where I had a lot of time off for surgeries. I have endometriosis, and so I had multiple surgeries. I had multiple appointments for IVF. And at that time, there wasn't an IVF clinic in Wagga, so I had to go to Albury multiple times a week sometimes. So I just constantly was asking for time off. Constantly and private about it too, because I didn't tell anyone except I think my manager finally sort of twigged. Just that discomfort of having to ask for that much time off. Those two things were the biggest things. Was I felt like because I was in a leadership role in my previous job, and so I felt like having that much time off was uncomfortable to ask for it, but also that I really constantly felt like I was letting my team down. And so, when I started my business, going back to your question of is it worth it? Like, I've never worked this hard, but I also have never had this much freedom. I go back to my list that I made of pros and cons of staying in the role that I was in versus starting my own business. And the list for pros was actually quite short.
For starting your own business.
For starting my own business, because the list for the pros and staying my previous role, there was a lot of pros. I knew I could do the role without having to learn a whole huge amount of things. But the couple of things on the pros list for starting my own business was mainly around that autonomy of that freedom to not only have my own work schedule that worked for me and for my kids and for my husband, but also that freedom to work as a physio in the way that I wanted to, which was incorporating the Pilates, which in my previous role, I just couldn't do that. So the two big things on my pros list was work the way that I want to work and work when I want to work. And so when you ask me that question, yeah, I have that question often because it is a lot of work. It is a lot of never turning your brain off. And I find that's the hardest part about owning your own business is really, really difficult to maintain boundaries because I've gotten quite good at like setting my boundaries for when I see clients, but I'm still working on setting the boundaries around the back end things. Like at the moment, I'm considering changing my practice management software. And that's a huge task, mental task. It's a huge amount of work upfront. I know that if I do, I'm not going to be able to turn my brain off as much as I'd like to in the next few months. But long term, it might be easier. It's that constant question of how much energy do I have to give to this right now? And it goes back to my comment earlier about making sure you're making time to rest, making sure you're sleeping as well as you can, making sure you're exercising, making sure you're getting a little bit of journaling in, a little bit of mindfulness, a little bit of meditation, because those are the things that bring me back to my gut instinct and that clarity. And again, asking for help. I've had a fantastic psychologist the last couple of years who's really helped me understand boundaries, taught me a huge amount in terms of the benefits of things like writing in a journal. Seems so basic and so seventh grade. And also I realized how bloody hard it was because I couldn't find time to write in my journal. And that was like a big wake-up call because I was like, it literally takes a couple of minutes and I'm not doing it. And that reminder of like self-care has to be first, especially in a caring profession, you know, as a physio. But that burnout of being in a caring profession like healthcare or teaching, that type of thing where you're directly in front of the people who need your help and they're asking for your help. And then you go home and you're directly in front of the people who are asking for your help and need your help. So you're just never off. And so that's something that I think I'm currently working on getting better at is just saying I'm going to take a few minutes. And luckily my kids are a bit older now. They're 6, 8, and 10. So I can sort of step away a little bit more than when they were babies and toddlers. Yeah, it's still a work in progress. And I think my answer to your question in a long roundabout way is yes, it is still worth it. If I was still in my old role, I think I'd feel like I had too much of a lid on top of me, if that makes sense. I like the expansiveness of having your own business to do what you want when you want. And this stage of my life, it's just crucial because I'd like to be able to be there with my kids as much as I can.
Yeah, and that's what we sort of have to remind ourselves, isn't it? You just got to take a moment to breathe and stop and go, okay, why am I here?
Yeah, why?
Why did
Absolutely.
I start?
Yeah, I did a mentorship course. I think it was in my second year of business, and brilliant mentorship course run by a physio who essentially she does coaching for business, small business owners. I definitely got a lot out of it. One of the biggest things that I got out of it was understanding my why, and that was she actually started her program that way. She said, "What's your why?" And I think one of the sort of awkward things about it was that I realized that my why was different than about, I think, 90% of the people there. And 90% of the people there were wanting to scale their business. They were wanting to push harder business-wise. And I kept coming back to my why was actually, I want to do less in my business right now. I want to establish my business and I want my business to go well so that it continues for myself, but also for my clients. But my scaling and my pushing hard is later. And I kept coming back to that. And I kept returning to that gut feeling of, yes, I could push harder right now, or yes, I could scale up right now. But the drawback of that would mean that my mental load would be much higher than it already is. And so I've just chosen to stay a solo practitioner for now. And maybe the time to grow is later. Maybe the time to hire a team is later. For me, staying as a solo practitioner, there's definitely drawbacks because when you're solo, you do it all.
Yes.
And so that's a negative. I have heard some people say that when you hire a team that you can sort of spread the load a bit more. But in my mind, the things that I'm good at is not, at the moment, is not
HR.
Yeah.
It's
and
huge.
it's a huge step. And I think I've just talked to colleagues that have done that. And I know that that is a huge weight on their shoulders, is the managing their team. And I just don't have capacity for that right now. I think that comparison thing is a huge, huge problem. There was a moment early in business where I would look at other practices and I'd be like, oh, I want to do that. I want to have like a presence. It very quickly made me realize that that was ego. And I had to be honest with myself that was growing a team because I'm passionate about having a team with me right now.
Yes.
And the answer kept coming back to it's just more important for me to like, you know, keep my days as my clinical days. And then I have my days when I'm mum. And I felt like if I'd hired a team, it would suddenly be very much a full-time workload, which I just don't want to do right now. So I still work part-time and at least face-to-face clientele part-time.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, just going back to returning to that why. And again, not to harp on about it, but if you're not looking after yourself well enough to be in tune with yourself, then you will just scramble, and constantly feel like you're trying to keep up with maybe a vision that is maybe not actually your vision.
Correct.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
And so true, because I've always grown up where people in the same industry as you aren't competitors. So we've always, no matter where I've worked, we've always just stayed in our own lane. We've always known our point of difference and stayed true to that. And it works because when you start comparing yourself to someone else, you're like, oh, they've got a team and maybe that's what I should be doing. But little do you know, that team is costing them money. They could be losing money, not making money.
100%. A lot of what I worked on with my psychologist is around that. Comparing, you see someone else and they look like they have got it all together. They look like they're smashing it as a mom. Their house is beautiful, but you don't know them. You don't know what their private struggles are. You don't know. I think that's what I feel like I've learned so much is, you know, what looks glossy from the outside is often not. Or if it is glossy, it's
Facade.
Who knows? Maybe some people are extremely lucky and maybe they do have a very glossy life. But I think most people are struggling in one area or another. They might be struggling financially, or they might be struggling relationships-wise, or they might be the exterior might look great, but the what's happening privately is not. So
yes,
I think that comparison thing it can be really dangerous. I think it's a really huge energy waster.
Yes,
and one of the things I sort of had to do personally was it's probably not great advice social media wise or marketing wise, but I am not on my business social media much at all. I understand a lot of people who use social media for their marketing and things like that, but that was one thing I had to delegate because I just found when I was on social media, I would see what some of the other practices might be doing, or I might see what a Pilates studio in Sydney's doing, and I might be like, oh, I could do that. And I think part of that is maybe this like mind that never turns off, is this a little bit of like, oh, that's a shiny object, I want to chase that. But also that feeling of like, I want so much out of life. I feel like I'm going to get emotional.
You're not the first, trust me.
I want so much. I want my life to be a rich, deep life from myself, my relationship with my husband, my kids. I want them to grow up and have really rich and deep and meaningful lives. I want my business to be rich and deep and meaningful, and I want my clients to walk away feeling like they got something very rich and deep and meaningful. So
yes,
you begin to learn that, like, I think at this stage of life, you've got so many roles and you want to do all of them well. And the reality is sometimes you're not going to be able to do that. And I think underlying that for me is also this health stuff that I have to manage in the background, which is fatigue. And if I push myself too hard, I do fall in a heap. And so it's funny because the irony is like my health stuff has been hard. I had endometriosis, wasn't diagnosed until we wanted to have babies, and then realized I had it pretty severely. So most of my 30s was lots of surgeries, lots of IVF intervention. Luckily, we were very blessed with that, and we have 3 healthy kids. But then around 2020, in the pandemic, and I've got a 9-month-old, a 2-year-old, and a 4-year-old at home, and my husband's an essential worker, so I'm still on maternity leave. I'm home with 3 kids, and I'm also having severe pain, and turns out it's a type of arthritis. It's a peripheral arthritis. It's an inflammatory arthritis. And essentially it erodes your bones. And so you have sort of joint pain. And most of mine is in my spine and my pelvis and in my leg. With that pain comes fatigue. And then around 2020 was when I got the diagnosis and I started to have management for it. It just changed my life to find the right doctor, to find the right medicine. And I think that's why I'm so driven in what I do, because I do get tired with my job, because caring for people is exhausting and draining. And when I feel like my energy is low because I'm either in a flare of fatigue or pain, or I just feel overwhelmed with my motherhood role, it is hard to pull together all of the energy that I need to do my job well. And that's probably coming back to the psychology that's helped me, is just learning that compassion and that empathy for yourself is part of that self-care picture. I remember even asking my psychologist, what does that mean to give myself empathy? Like, I remember being very, almost like I hadn't given myself the time to do that before. And then realizing, oh, that's at the core of everything.
Yes.
It was such a kind of light bulb. And to realize that in my 40s, I was just sort of a bit gobsmacked by it all, because I feel like in hindsight, I just had pushed so hard. I'd worked so hard. Underlying it all, I tend to be a little bit of a scrambly person, a little bit of a disorganized person. And so a little bit of that judgment of oh, if only I could pull myself together a bit more, or if only I could do this. So that self-talk was quite negative. And in that process of sort of, I think, going from my 30s of endometriosis and IVF into my 40s of this arthritis diagnosis, and then also having a family member who's been diagnosed with ADHD, and learning about ADHD, what it is. I didn't actually really know. It's so much more broad, and there's aspects of my personality that I just always thought was my personality, whereas now I have seen a hint of, oh, maybe that scrambliness and that kind of chasing shiny objects all the time, and thinking I can do all of it, thinking I can do the 10 shiny objects all at once, and realizing that not everyone's like that.
But a lot of small business owners are, though.
Yeah.
I see it every day.
Yeah.
They really are. So you're not alone.
And there's this question of, do I chase this ADHD assessment and diagnosis for myself, or do I not? That's an option,
So, maybe it's because you're a mother. Maybe it's because you're about to hit 40.
Yeah.
Maybe running a business is really very hard, and you have a lot of thoughts going on.
And that's what that constant conversation back and forth in my head is. In my 40s now, I am running a small business, and I have 3 very busy children who constantly need me. And then in this last year as well, my husband, probably 3 years ago now, he became a firefighter. But last year he moved into a permanent role, which meant that he was away for 3 months up in Sydney. And that was,
tough.
there are times where, like you asked me, is this worth it? And the pro was that I could flex my business back a bit and be more present with the kids. I was still working, but I just pulled back my hours a little bit. The con to that is financially very stressful, because you're a certain income for a while. But the beauty was that I could go, okay, I'm going to see a few less clients so that I can manage home life. Yeah, again, all the same messages of, asking for help. I was getting my kids carpools here or there. Shout out to all the beautiful women in my life who just put their hands up and say yes. And my in-laws, very relying on them massively. And I look back to when I first became a mum, and I could not ask for help. And in hindsight, there was certainly some postpartum anxiety and depression going on there that was influencing that ability to ask for help, for sure. But it's so funny, because I've listened to a lot of podcasts about women in their 40s and in their 50s, and they sort of, that same kind of feeling of, with time, they've learned about themselves more, and they feel like they feel like that freedom to be a little bit more vulnerable. And maybe that, like you, that question about pride, it's like, no, pride left the building a long time ago.
Was it when you pushed babies out?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And oh, look, there's so much you're saying that is relatable to so many business owners. Like when you're trying to juggle a home life, and you and I are similar, we're people pleasers. We don't like to let people down. So when you have to ask for a day off work, and you're entitled to it, and your boss doesn't care, but to have to ask for that, there's a lot of guilt with that.
There is so much guilt. The amount of guilt that I've carried in my life is unbelievable. And I think that's been probably the the biggest benefit of actually getting professional help to manage that, because it was beginning to drown me. And it's interesting because in some of the neurodiverse world of ADHD are the feelings of like rejection sensitivity is a big one. That's a massive thing for me. And that's, I think, why I'm a people pleaser, because I don't want to be rejected. And that goes along with this sense of belonging, which as a solo business owner, you have a lot of loneliness. I think there's definitely a lot of loneliness in it, because you do feel this like pressure to figure it out all yourself. But I think it's like going back to what I said earlier about asking for help. The benefit is not only that someone's sharing the problem with you, but it reduces that sense of loneliness of being the only one there to kind of carry. And I think it was like kind of confronting vulnerability and that discomfort of sort of putting your hand up and saying, I'm not doing this right, or I'm not doing this well, and I think I need a bit of help. I've definitely had to confront that both in motherhood and in business. And it's like you said, that sort of, there's a tinge of sort of embarrassment there. But the minute you put your hand up, or the minute you talk to another mother or another business owner and say, this is actually really hard for me and I don't know what to do. I don't know what the next step is. Or reaching out and getting help like with bookkeeping or accounting, or it's that initial discomfort the first few times you do it. It is so awkward and you feel like your skin's crawling because you're just like, you know, that guilt kind of comes in too, because you're like, I should be able to figure this out. But immediately when you ask, you realize how good humans are. Like, they're just like, yeah, that sucked for me too before I did this or I did that. And it's motherhood and business. And it's that, I think that rejection sensitivity side of things where you're afraid to put your hand up because you don't want to look like the idiot. You don't want to like be outcast as, oh, why is she in business? You know, or why did she have kids if she can't do that, or whatever. You know, it's like
spot on.
There are nasty people out there that might say those things, but I'd say about 90% of humanity is like, yeah, I had a hard time too. When you're a solo practitioner or a mom that's struggling or dad that's struggling, the first thing you can do is, it was an Instagram post, that's right. And it was actually Prince William was like on a podcast and he was talking with a few other guys and they were talking about men asking for help. And Prince William sort of was saying everyone's born with a toolkit that is there for their mental health, and no one's toolkit looks the same. And not one person on this earth has the right tools for their situation. Every single person on this earth is going to have to keep adding to their toolbox. And the only way you add to your toolbox is by asking for help. And so I thought that was it just stuck with me, because I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I feel like the last decade of my life has been about, is recognizing what my toolbox is, knowing that my toolbox isn't full for one reason or another, and recognizing there's going to be things in my toolbox that are always going to be there, like my arthritis and my endometriosis and the fact that my kids' personalities are the way they are, or my husband's job is challenging in terms of shift work. So the things in my toolbox at the moment are, some things are permanent in there. And then I need to ask for help for the things that I don't have, which is accounting skills and social media help. And I think the first way to drown in a business is to think you can do it all, because no one can. And the easiest way out of that is to ask for help.
Exactly. And there's so many points you've touched on there that are so relatable to the people, whether they're our clients, whether they're in our networking groups. But if you're still at the point where you're not asking for help, or you're not having a coffee with someone and saying, I'm struggling, you're in the wrong groups, because you should be able to find there are a lot of kind people out there who have been where you've been, who are happy to listen. And if you're not finding them, get out of the circles you're in. Because if you're
there certainly are. That's, I think, one of the things that I felt like in that mentorship class that I took, I definitely felt like the odd bird out, because, you know, every time I think it was like a webinar that we had once a week, or maybe, I can't remember how frequently it was now, but, you know, really feeling like I wasn't in maybe the right space for me. And it certainly helped push me in terms of really being true to my why. That was the biggest thing that I took from it. But definitely finding your people is the right thing to do. And, you know, the right people might not actually be in a business circle. The right people for your business advice actually might be other mums at school that they've discovered something that worked for them in their own life that has nothing to do with your business. But that moment that you might take away from a conversation, actually you might apply it to your business. And I think getting there's a lot of advertising out there for do this mentorship class and you'll be a $1 million practice or whatever.
Yes.
Like there's a lot of that stuff out there. And there is certainly value. And I definitely think if you're at the stage of your career where you want to push hard and you want some advice, and in your gut instinct, if that's the advice that feels right for you, then go for it. But
yes,
I think trying to make yourself fit into something that's not quite right, that you need to be like aware of that. Like you said, you need to be aware of the fact that maybe this isn't the right spot for me right now. Maybe it's right for me in 5 years, and maybe I'll back out of this. And I think one of the things that I learned from, I was listening to Brene Brown's podcast kind of around the COVID time, I remember 2020, 2021, and she was talking about this intensity that we have in our culture of if you start something, you got to finish it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think it was Glennon Doyle talking about, what about you start something and you recognize very quickly it's not right for you, then step out of it. There's no shame in that. If anything, that's a glorious thing because you're really thinking about your own needs and your own wants. And I think as women, I think especially, it's hard sometimes because we often will put others first. Or if you're a people pleaser like we are, then you can catch yourself pleasing them before you're pleasing yourself. And the sense of knowing your why, setting those boundaries for you, for what works for you, getting used to that discomfort of upsetting some people, or it is all part of running a business because you can't please everyone.
No.
And the same thing again goes with motherhood. It's like, your kids are going to be upset with you sometimes because you said no. And that's okay because they're building the resilience.
Exactly.
You're also, that boundary's there for a reason.
I like that you've been open touching on the psychology side of it because, again, I'm not sure if our audience is aware, but there are a lot of business owners that do go and see someone and speak to someone. We know of them because we have that really good, open, honest, but confidential relationship with our clients that they will say, look, I've went to see someone, I've hit rock bottom and I just need some help. Yeah. And that's totally okay. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. If you don't feel like you've got the support group or you feel like you're weighing your husband down by going home
this is why I started to see someone, because what I found was I was using my friends and my husband as my counselor / psychologist. And it got to the point where I felt like it was just too much. There was too much of me unloading. Yeah, okay. And the energy wasn't a back and forth, like, how was your day? My day was like this, blah, blah, blah. I'd catch up with my girlfriends and I would just vent. I'd be like, unload. Right at the end of the dinner or the coffee or whatever, I'd be like, oh, and what about you? And then it's be like, time to go, And so I just got to the point where I was like, I need to unload to someone who's a professional. Their job is to let me talk. Yeah. Yes. And it gave me so much clarity, I think. And it sort of restored, I guess, that natural sort of energy rhythm of like of course, in a husband and wife or, partner situation, like you're going to have times where you need more support than they do. Like last year, my husband needed to go do this. So I had to be the one that was like, okay, I'm pulling my bootstraps up. I'm going to do a little bit more of the hard work at home kind of so that he can go do that. And we're very open with trying to keep that balance. So like if you get this opportunity work-wise, then okay, then I'm going to do a bit of training this year. And you might need to lift your game at home a bit more when I do. So it's like this back and forth kind of fairness. But I guess that's what I mean with the psychologist. It sort of began to feel that I was not being the kind of friend that I wanted to be. Felt like I was taking and not giving back.
I do wonder, is that why people don't just tell it how it is in business? Like,
I don't know. I think there is I probably would categorize myself as maybe, I don't know if professional is not the right word, but it just feels like a lot of physios that I know have this persona of perfection. And I think alongside that maybe is because we're giving advice, we should have our shit together. I think there's a sense of that pressure. But what I've actually felt in my own practice, I think since I've been more vulnerable and open, is that when I tell people, like, I understand it's hard to exercise. It's hard to exercise for me because of fatigue or pain or time. But I feel like the more open I am with my clients, the more I actually get them on board.
Yeah.
That's what the irony is I feel like physios in particular, I feel like I'm only speaking about them because I know them. I've worked alongside them. But there is definitely a sense of, especially I think if you own your own practice, you don't want to necessarily say you're struggling in any area because you don't want to have that look like a weakness, I guess, in terms of the public eye. I guess maybe that's what sets me apart with my clients is that I am pretty upfront with just like managing your health is hard in this culture that we live in. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of time poorness. We often are managing 3 or 4 roles in our lives. Maybe that vulnerability, I'm happy to talk about the fact that I needed some psychology help to kind of get almost just some like mental and emotional structure, something to kind of give me a foundation of maintaining health myself. That was certainly where I was at. And it's interesting though, because I reflect back to my postpartum time where I know now I really was struggling and I didn't know I was struggling in the time.
Yeah, right.
And I initially judged myself harshly about that because I was like, I'm a healthcare practitioner. I should have known. Now, it's very obvious to me. Had I asked for help, I think it would have been a lot easier,
Yeah.
But I didn't know. And so that's hard. And I actually took my husband along to a few of the psychology sessions. It started initially with a counselor and then I transitioned across to a psychologist. But so those early counseling sessions, I accessed the EAP, which I think a lot of businesses have. And I shout out to EAP all the time because that's what sort of helped me initially get some help when I needed it. I think because it was hard for me to notice that I was struggling, I actually took my husband along and I said, you need to learn what my signs are. And like one of my signs, weirdly, was that going to the grocery store, I stopped going. I used to be the grocery shopper and I just stopped going because I hated when people asked me, how are you? Because you run into people at the grocery store here in Wagga. It's like, hey, how you going?
Yes.
How you going? Everyone says hi. Everyone's checking in. And I just couldn't be checked in with. Like I couldn't be asked how I was because I felt like I was going to cry on the spot. I think it was the postpartum anxiety and depression and overwhelm. And my husband was working long hours and we'd had a traumatic pregnancy and then we had luckily a healthy baby, but very unsettled baby. I felt like if anyone asked me how I was going to burst into tears. And I think that's on the background of like the IVF because I remember feeling similarly going through IVF. I didn't want people to ask me, how are you? What's new? Because the underlying question is, oh, you've been married a few years now. Are you going to have a baby?
Yes.
That's the underlying question. And I just remember feeling so raw and so sensitive, but also not knowing it was postpartum anxiety or depression.
There you go.
With the counselor's help, realized these funny little things that I'd stopped doing. It was kind of like the question of like, have you stopped your hobbies? And now it's like if I haven't taken myself for a walk for a few days or a week, my husband will be like, would you like to go for a walk? Just like he just does it very gently. He's just like nudging, like he can kind of sense that like the
Tension's
kettle's
there.
boiling. And some days I take it well and some days I'm like, no, I don't want to go for a walk.
And that's probably a good reminder for all of us too is when you start to not be yourself. But like you said, you're in the moment.
You don't know it. And so you need someone who's with you a lot, whether it's a mother or a sister or a husband or whatever. I needed him to spot that. I needed him to notice because I actually also felt a fair bit of fear around that time because my own experience was happening alongside this very, very tragic and sad thing that happened to some people that we knew. And I remember asking the counselor, how do I know that it's not going to get to that point?
Yeah,
Like
scary.
there's so much fear when you know that you're not feeling well, either physically or emotionally or whatever it is, mentally, and you see an example alongside you that's like further down the line and much more tragic. It's like, how do I know I'm not going to get to that? And I had to talk that out. I had to go, okay, well, these are some of the strategies. And one of them was that my husband was kind of like my eyes for a little while, like kind of monitoring and watching and just, doing gentle things to kind of like prompt me, I guess. And that's probably where that self-care passion has probably come from is, again, like looking after myself. Like I can't look after my children well or my clients well unless I know that I'm working on my own self-well. And it goes back to that why of like, why I'm in business. It's like I want to be a good physio and a good Pilates teacher. I also want to be a really good mum and I want to be a good wife and I want to be a good friend and a sister and daughter and all the things that I am. But yeah, it's just unless you're having those kind of quiet moments to go back to your why, it's enough quiet moments in your life that help you stay on track.
You've shared so much with us. Look, I want to end on because over the years, like you've gone through almost 5 years in business. You've been through the ups and downs. You're openly talking about getting that work-life balance and, you know, especially as a mother as well and a wife. Over the years, if you were to reflect and then tell another business owner what you wish you knew when you first started about this whole topic, what would that be?
I think probably one thing that just pops up in my mind is that it goes along with the asking for help. It's a little bit of that. Sometimes you have to do something up front that feels scary that you know long term is going to be better off. And like I remember when I finally got admin support, I wish I'd asked sooner. I guess that's probably the big message is if you're wondering about something, take the dive. And yes, if it feels scary, if it's a financial outlay or if it's a sort of a step in your business growth or whatever that feels scary. The thing is just try it. Like a lot of things can go wrong, but also if you haven't tried it, you don't know. A lot of things can go right from asking for help or going that next step. And so I think just that be flexible with the growth, continue to check in with your why, but don't be afraid of those next steps. Don't be afraid of that what feels like growth. It definitely has like that fear component to it. Yes. And I think just try and that whole corny phrase of like feel the fear and do it anyway. I think that's it. Just ask for help or take that step, see how it goes. Yes. Come back to your why and go, okay, actually this isn't quite right for me. For me, what's worked well is like not locking myself into too much, like not locking myself into a lease or not locking myself into, you know, a 5-year agreement with something. Like for me, I've had to take it 1 month at a time. And that's worked for me. And luckily, I'm in a rental space where I can have that freedom. I think some people don't have that. You have that freedom to take those risks if you're not locked into too much.
Yes.
So be careful with that locking in. I think that's definitely part of it.
Very valuable. Thank you so much for opening up and sharing with our audience.
Yeah, pleasure. Anytime.
If you would like some more tips on how to help you in your small business, visit the link in the show notes to sign up to our newsletter. Until next time, stay fresh and stay kind.